Everyone has them. We all have that person in our lives, or have had, or will have that person who tries to make themselves our public enemy number one. They call us names, they call us out, they deliberately try to embarrass us. They will go out of their way to do something that's spiteful, something that's nasty, something that undermines us, something that ruins our lives in some way, shape, or form. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to deal with them and some of the psychological tips that you can use in order to get these people off your back and to make sure that you can live a life in which they can't affect you. But first, my name is Micaiah.bell, and if you've been on this channel, you know who I am. But for those who have not been here, I'm a graduate of Harvard where I studied psychology, and also Oxford where I studied sociology. Very passionate about the social sciences, and on this channel, I talk about everything that ranges from social behavior and a plethora of other topics. I do a lot of public speaking. I've traveled around the world to 5 countries, speaking at conferences and hosting my own seminars as well. And this is the field in which I'm the most passionate about. So I love getting on here and sharing some of the information, some of the knowledge with you all, and just trying to improve people's lives. And today the topic at hand is how to deal with people that we don't like. And it's a very difficult thing to do. However, you are in luck because there are definitely a lot of things that you can do which will help you out a ton. But I want to start with a quick story. So I was just speaking at a high school, local high school down here in Georgia, to a group of students, and they were asking me a ton of stories or a ton of questions, and I was telling them a ton of stories. And one of the things that I told them is that who you are and what you do are 2 separate things. And that is important for this video right now, because you have to be able to delineate who you are and separate that from what you do. And we'll talk about why that's important. But the first thing that you have to realize is that everybody deals with somebody who we dislike. Oftentimes it falls into one of 2 categories. And these are not the only 2 categories. However, these are the 2 most common ones. It either falls into the social side or the workplace side. So it's either somebody who's in our social circle, and I'll include family in there as well, or it's the workplace. It's somebody who has a bit more control over our lives in terms of the fact that they will set our salaries and that sort of thing, or they have some control over the output that we have and what we do. But these are the main 2. And what I want to focus on here is socially, this includes anybody who is on the same level as you. When I talk about the workplace, I'm going to mainly be focusing on someone who is a boss, whether they're a boss or a coach, or somebody who just has some level of authority over you and they dictate what you do. But I want to start with socially. So a lot of times people find themselves in these scenarios where they deal with somebody who they dislike, whether it's somebody who is just picking on them and calling them out in the group, or it's somebody who doesn't respect you, or it's somebody who just doesn't listen to what you have to say, doesn't respect boundaries. And I recently did a video on how to deal with a narcissist. And one of the greatest ways to deal with a narcissist is to set boundaries. And that's one of the greatest ways to deal with somebody who you dislike. And the psychology behind this works like this. A narcissist, but this also goes for people who are not narcissists. This goes for people who are just mistreating you. But a narcissist wants to exert a level of control over you. That's what brings them joy and fulfillment in the world. And in order to do so, they realize that they have to earn this control. And they earn it by undermining the boundaries that you have, so to the point where they now control everything. Imagine you have a control center, but it's surrounded by a ginormous fence. And this person is trying to kick down the fence, and they're looking for all the weak points until they can get into the control center. And once they find a weak point, they're going to exploit it over and over and over until that part of the fence breaks down, and now they have a foothold and a stronghold within your life. That's essentially how a narcissist will work. They have no regard for how you feel. They have no regard for how they themselves will feel in the future. They only care about right now and how much control they can exert over somebody right now. So the reason why it's important to have boundaries is because when it comes to people who you dislike, you have to be very, very strict with these boundaries. These people cannot overstep in any way, shape, or form. Oftentimes this comes in very, very subtle things. People think it's funny when I say this sort of thing, but this stuff happens very subtly. Somebody who wants to exert control over you is not going to start off by just saying something outright disrespectful or outlandish to you. They're going to start with something very minuscule, like mispronouncing your name repeatedly. After you've told them multiple times, hey, that's not how you pronounce my name, they still somehow do it. And they blame it on, oh, I just forgot. Oh, dude, why are you being so serious? It's not that deep. It's not that serious, bro. Relax. Like, I'll get it right. And the people who end up being disrespected the most are the ones who don't stand on those small boundaries. And what I've often found in studying the psychology of this is that those who end up being disrespected are afraid to set the initial boundaries. They aren't scared to set the hard boundaries. And what happens oftentimes is this: they're afraid to be the person who says, hey, that's not how you say my name. And I would appreciate it if you said it correctly, and set that hard boundary and stop responding to the mispronunciation of your name. They're afraid to do that because they feel like if they do that, they're going to come across too strong, or they're going to upset the person, and they don't want to upset the person. And oftentimes this stems from a desire to be liked by the group of people or by that one specific person. However, what you realize is that being liked and being respected are two different things. Yet being respected is always better to be chosen than to just be liked, because respect often comes with being liked as well. Or respect can also come without being liked. People will say, I don't respect this person, I don't like this person, but I respect them. And that's oftentimes much better than being, oh, I like that person, but I don't really respect them. So here's the thing. When you are setting these small boundaries, you have to be very serious about them. And what I've noticed is that people who don't set these small boundaries are able to set the large ones. However, it ends up being much more difficult of a situation than it could have been had they just set the boundaries earlier. And what I mean by that is this: after somebody has been disrespected long enough by somebody who they dislike, they eventually get to a point where they're fed up with it, they're upset, and they blow their fuse. And it ends up turning into a huge argument, and it ends up being terrible, and friendships fall out, and all these crazy things happen, and people are talking about what happened at work, so forth and so on. And it ends up being a very messy situation. But what I found is that the person who sets that very hard boundary after being disrespected for so long didn't have that much of a problem with setting that boundary. They had a problem with setting the small ones before. They were too afraid to set that before, but they weren't that afraid to set the one at the end. And what I found is that it often brings a lot more pain and a lot more suffering overall. And you have to put up with a lot more disrespect when you wait to set the large boundary. But when you set the small boundary initially, what you find is that people don't even get the opportunity to push you to the larger boundary. So when you're the type of person who doesn't allow disrespect, or you don't allow yourself to be called out of your name, you don't allow these subtle things to happen, then people realize, oh, that's someone who I should respect. That's somebody who I'm not going to be able to play these psychological control games with. That's somebody who, when I come around them, I have to be on my A game. I have to act correctly. I have to come correctly, because they're not going to allow me to disrespect them. And that is the first thing towards dealing with somebody who you dislike. I would say if you meet somebody whose personality you realize is not going to be a good fit for you, you have to set your boundaries immediately up front. Or if you meet somebody who seems to be disrespecting you initially, you have to set the boundaries up front. All they want to do is see how much they can get away with. They're not necessarily in the business of starting some outright scandal or getting into some large fight or starting something that's going to be a big spectacle. They really just want to see how much they control you and how much they can get out of you. And all you have to do is shut them down initially, and they're just going to go elsewhere. And the crazy thing is this: so many people, when we talk about socially, so many people want to be accepted by someone so much that they would put up with that rather than start a scene. And what they don't realize is that it is better to not be accepted by a large amount of people, or anyone in general, than to be accepted by people who disrespect you. And I've seen this countless times happen in people's lives where they allow themselves to be disrespected, they stay for longer, it degrades them, and they realize that the person who they've become over the several years of putting up with this disrespect is not the person they ever envisioned themselves becoming. People always talk about, especially while they're younger or especially before they've encountered something like this, they talk about who they want to be. They talk about this idea of themselves as a person and how they want to make their imprint on the world and who they would want they themselves to be. Yet, when they encounter these situations, they don't act in accordance with it. And it's oftentimes that fear holding them back. But that fear is meant to keep you comfortable, and it's not meant to help you realize your true self. And you have to be the type of person who lets go of that fear. So the first step is to set boundaries. Now, if you've been dealing with someone who's been disrespecting you or who you don't like, and this is still in the social setting for quite some time now, and you have not set those boundaries, well, there are still some things that you can do. The first thing you can do is turn a new leaf. Start showing up less. Stop being around those people who disrespect you. Stop spending as much time with them and start setting some new boundaries. Hey guys, you know what? I've been thinking about it and I actually don't appreciate X, Y, and Z. I would appreciate it if you guys did a different thing or said a different thing. And if they don't adhere to that, well then guess what? They're probably not the kind of person who should be in your social life anyway. I'm a big proponent, like I said earlier, of having no friends rather than having bad friends. I would never spend my time around people who disrespect me, around people who disrespect my time, my efforts, and who I am as a person. I would rather spend all of my time alone than to be around people who don't like me or people who I don't like giving my energy to. The next thing you can do, which I would say is potentially one of the best things, is more of a psychological tip that I would say is to counter their negativity with positivity. So somebody says something disrespectful, say something respectful to them. And that's one of the things that bothers those people the most, because what they're seeking to do is to bring negativity into the world. However, when you bring positivity into the world, it counters that, and that's an environment that they cannot be in. They want to be in an environment in which they control how everyone feels. They don't want somebody else to control how they feel. Yet, when you bring positivity into the situation, you are now controlling how they feel, and they don't like that. So they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to remove themselves from the situation, or they're going to stop saying the disrespectful and negative things. But they're going to probably initially test you first by saying more disrespectful things. Okay, well, I don't like what this person said. I don't like how respectful that was. I'm going to say something extra disrespectful and see what happens. See if I can shut all that down. And when you're the kind of person who says, oh, I see that, I understand that psychological trick. They're trying to test whether I'll continue to do this positivity and this positive act. You then counter back with something equally as positive. And then they're like, oh, well, they're countering with something again. So I have one of two options. I can either continue to be disrespectful and they're going to counter it, and eventually I'm going to get fed up with it, or I can stop being disrespectful. And I've seen this work countless times. Now, this one oftentimes can take a good bit of time to happen, but teachers oftentimes employ this when they work with students who are oftentimes disrespectful to the teachers. They will show respect back to the student. And what you realize a lot of times is this: a lot of people disrespect you because they've lived a life in which no one has respected them. And you have the opportunity to be the first person who's respected them. And what they're looking for sometimes, in some cases, psychologically, is respect. They want to feel like somebody respects them. And the way that they seek that out when they've been disrespected for so long in their own personal lives is to disrespect others. They feel as though if they disrespect others, they will be respected. These people will almost in a way psychologically fear them. They know they have control. But what they're truly looking for is a sense of respect to come from other people. They want other people to say, I like that person. I respect that person. I'm going to show them some gratitude. I'm going to show them some favor. I'm going to show them some mercy and some niceness. And that's what they're truly seeking out, even if they know it subconsciously or if they know it consciously or not. Their unconscious is seeking that respect. And you have the opportunity to be the person who then gives that respect. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, oh, I would never want to do that, I hate this person, blah, 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 it's not. Well, guess what? You're becoming the same person as them. And this is something that most people don't realize, is that when you deal with somebody who's disrespectful and you give in to their disrespect and you thus disrespect them back, it's only a matter of time before you start to disrespect other people in your life as well. You think that by you disrespecting this person who's being disrespectful to you, that you're going to be able to flip that switch off when you go deal with other people. It's not the case, because all that's doing is training your brain how to respond in certain situations. It's training your brain. It's filling your brain with these certain responses and these certain attitudes that are going to then dictate how you act in other situations. And that is precisely the last kind of person that you want to be. The strongest people are the ones who can do what they know they need to do, regardless of how difficult it is. I know it's hard. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's not difficult. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the easiest thing to just be nice to somebody who's openly disrespecting you. But I am going to tell you, it is the one counter and the one antidote that will absolutely make your life much better. It will absolutely counter all of these negative attacks that people are giving to you. And I would say that that is probably the best way to deal with people who are disrespecting you and mistreating you in your personal life. Now I want to take a moment and shift to the workplace, because the psychology behind this is quite different. The workplace is a very interesting place. And I say the workplace, but I really just mean any place that has a hierarchy of authority, whether that is a sports team, a workplace, or a club or organization that you've joined, so forth and so on. Anything in which somebody has real levels of control, they dictate something that you want, whether it's the pay, whether it's how you do in your sport, whether it's the opportunity you get to perform, so forth and so on. When you're dealing with somebody in a position of power who openly does not like you, the best way to deal with that is to remain unfazed. And the psychology behind this is very interesting. When I was talking to those high schoolers, as I mentioned, I said to them, who I am and what I do are two different things. I'm Micaiah Bell. I have played football. I now run two companies. I'm now doing social media, talking to people. I've been a global public speaker for quite a while, and I host these seminars. These are all things that I do. But who Micaiah Bell is as a person is separate from that. It's more abstract. Who I am is the person who wakes up and gets things done regardless of how I feel, or who wakes up and has ambition to do things, who stays focused and remains focused amidst distractions, who goes after things that would be very difficult to achieve, who has a vision to do things that are wild and outlandish and get them done, who wants to do things that people have never done before, who under pressure won't fold. That's the kind of person who I've molded myself into becoming. So therefore, it doesn't matter if I'm traveling the world as a public speaker, or I'm running a company, or I'm sitting in front of a camera talking, or I'm doing something else. I'm embodying all those traits in what I do, regardless. And the reason why this is so important for the workplace is because oftentimes what you realize is that the people in these positions who are disrespecting you already have power, and they like exercising that power. But the kick that they get out of it is not the fact that they can tell you what to do. It's the fact that they can dictate how you feel and how you show up. They want to be able to say to themselves, I disrespected and beat down this person so much that they ended up submitting to me in every way, shape, and form, in what they do and how they feel and their sense of self, so forth and so on. But when you make up in your mind that you're not going to be fazed by how this person treats you, you're going to show up to work regardless. You're going to show up to the practice regardless. You're going to give full effort regardless. You're going to show up and show respect even to that person regardless. Well, then they realize that the control they have over you is not as much as they thought. And that's going to do one of two things. It's going to bother them very much so that they keep coming after you and keep trying to disrespect you, or it's going to make them immediately clean up their act and immediately feel that respect. The psychology is very similar to the social setting. Oftentimes they want to feel respect. And when you really dive into the stories behind these people, what you realize is that they were disrespected when they were employees, or they're being disrespected by their superiors, or they're being disrespected at home. And the only way that they can find respect is to carry out disrespect towards others. And that comes from a desire to get respect, but it also comes from learning. And they feel like they've learned that this is the way to get respect. And the only way to get respect, or the only way to do things, is to disrespect others. And a lot of them truly do believe that. But here's the thing. When you have proven to be the person who perseveres for so long, regardless of what other people are doing, or regardless of what the superior is putting onto you, it becomes a part of your character. It becomes something that nobody can ever take from you. The boss would have to blatantly lie in order for them to have any statement in which they could say that you gave way to their disrespect. And it develops a bit of character about who you are as a person that allows you to be successful. Let me tell you something. Whatever position you're in right now is temporary, but the lessons you learn from it are permanent. The way that you train your brain from what you're doing right now is permanent, but the position you're in is going to change. Whether it's a job, a social setting, whether it's a sports team, a club, an organization, an area that you live in, all of these things are subject to change. And they change very, like overnight, you could get a phone call that somebody's in the hospital and now you have to move across the country to take care of them. And your life just completely shifted. Your job just changed. Yet what's not going to change is who you are as a person. You're going to carry that person because that's part of your soul. That's part of your conscious. That's part of your psychology. It's part of your brain. It's part of your being. And that doesn't change. So yet the being is formed by external situations. So you have to be the person who can persevere through these things. And I would say this is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through playing sports, through running companies, through traveling the world and seeing people, through studying at the most elite universities. I realized that everything just wants to test me. Another great question I got asked by these high schoolers when I was mentoring them was, what's your biggest struggle? Or what was your greatest struggle that you had to overcome? And I said to them, I understand the question you're trying to ask, but that's not the question that you should ask. The question that you actually want the answer to is, what made me overcome any struggle? And because my struggle is not going to be the same for you, the viewer. My struggle wasn't going to be the same for those high schoolers who I was talking to. Yet the abstract lessons that I learned were definitely the same. And I said to them, look, I decided that I was going to be the kind of person who, regardless of what I was going through, regardless of how much I was being disrespected, regardless of how difficult something was, I was going to show up anyway. End of story. I was going to show up, do what I needed to do to the best of my ability, because I realized that those are the people who become successful. All of this stuff is subject to change. Today, I feel great and amazing. I'm recording this video. Tomorrow, something terrible could happen. I could get some horrible news. But guess what? Life is going to continue, and I'm still going to have to make decisions, and I'm still going to have to do things. And whether there's something that happens that makes me completely pivot my life, the kind of person who I have to be is going to be determined by the lessons that I've learned from the situations that I've been in. So I made it up in my mind that I'm not going to let these external things affect me or the disrespect get to me. And I'm definitely not going to let someone else decide who I am. That was, I think, the next biggest lesson, which is these people want to try to decide who you are. They want to tell you who you are. But once you make up your mind that you're the person who's not going to be told who you are, well, guess what? You get to decide who you are. And when I realized that I have so much control over my life and where I go and how successful I become that I don't have to spend any bit of time thinking about what someone else thinks of me. I told the students this: everything in life just wants to test you. How difficult something is, it's just a test. How easy something is, it's just a test. How much you could get away with something or how easily you could get away with something, it's just a test. How difficult it would be to do something, it's just a test. All of these things are just tests of who you are. And you can look at all of these various texts. There are psychology books that will talk about it. There are religious texts that will talk about it. There are Bible scriptures that will talk about it. There are various things that will talk about the fact that you will be tested in life. End of story. Like that is guaranteed. It is completely guaranteed that you will be tested in life. Whether you take the Bible verse that talks about Satan will test you in life and walks around the earth looking for who he can test, or you take psychology, which talks about the brain being under immense amounts of pressure and having to fall back on its cognitive processes to then produce something, you will be tested regardless. You will be under levels of stress. You will be under people who disrespect you. You will be tested by how difficult something is. It's coming. End of story. So if it's coming, then how do you pass the test? Most people would have thought that passing the test is determined by how well you perform in something. And that's absolutely not, that's the wrong test. People have been looking at it in the wrong way for so long. The test that you passed is, what kind of person were you during that situation? Were you the person who still did what you needed to do regardless? Were you the person who still maintained a smile and still respected people regardless of being disrespected? Were you the person who never let the bitterness of other people tell you that you needed to be bitter? See, when you allow people and their disrespect to turn you into a disrespectful person, essentially what you've done is you've allowed someone else tell you how to live your life. You've allowed someone else's experiences to become your own experiences. And I made it up in my mind that I wasn't going to be that kind of person. Like I wasn't going to let somebody else dictate how I act. I wasn't going to let somebody else's disrespect force me to disrespect someone else. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I've been doing this my entire life. These are lessons I had learned recently. And I feel like I need to share them with people because many people go through life having never learned these lessons. And I feel like these are the things that really make the difference between not just somebody who's successful or not, but somebody who has lived a life worth living. I think that's the biggest number of success, or the biggest way to quantify success. People will talk about success, whether it's money or whether it's notoriety or whether it's something that you built and done. I think success is just determined by, did you live a life that was worth living? If you look back and said, if somebody offered you the opportunity, hey, you get to live your life again, but you're going to do all the exact same things, would you relive it? That determines whether you were successful or not. And I decided that I was not going to live a life in which when I die, I'm going to look back and say, that wasn't a life worth living. That just wasn't going to be my fate. So I decided, in order to pass these tests, no one's going to decide the kind of person that I am. I'm going to decide the kind of person that I am and the kind of person that I want to be, and I'm going to become that person. So I hope these things all help. Basically, in short, for dealing with people in the workplace who are disrespecting you, people who have power over you, you have to remain solid, you have to hold frame, and you have to not give way to their disrespect. For dealing with people in social settings who are disrespecting you or who don't like you, you have to be the person who sets hard boundaries and does not let people push past those boundaries, especially in the beginning. And you stand on that business, you stand on business, as they say, and you don't let people push past, because the moment that you do, they will continue to do so. And it only gets harder and harder to set boundaries after you've let somebody push past them. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please share with somebody. Every bit helps. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Until then, stay improving.